following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Are you implying here some kind of conspiracy?
Like, everybody needs to be woke.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. It is October 17th, Thursday. So today in the news, if you haven't heard, Fox News' Brett Baier redeems himself with a scathing interview with Kamala Harris, and the liberals spin it as a victory. It's more like a death knell. And also the FBI's revised their violent crime numbers. What do you think? What do you think they say? So we're going to get to this news and more coming up in the next 45 minutes or so. So let's get into the headlines. All right, I'm going to start out with PJ Media here. It's sort of a editorial opinion piece by Victoria Taft. I don't know who needs to hear this, but snap out of it before the election. So she's basically talking about people are not really paying attention to the influence they may be under. I'm talking specifically to liberals about whether or not they are dealing with reality or they're just being gaslit. If you're just in the media bubble, the Democrat or liberal media bubble, you're going to be making the wrong decision in the election. Now, I'm not necessarily against Democrats. I will never vote for a Democrat again, but I can understand where you're coming from. But Kamala Harris is not a good choice to lead the United States ever, really, but particularly in this point in time. So let's go on to the more of the news here. I'm having a bunch of issues already. All right, from the Post-Millennial, Kamala crashes in Fox News primetime interview, gets grilled over border trans surgeries for prisoners, national security. So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently when she was, Brett Baier said when she was asked whether or not she would do anything differently than her presumed predecessor, her boss, Joe Biden. So just bear with me a second here. I have a couple difficulties with the tech. So I believe we're streaming. So I hope we are. Let's just bear with me here as I try to iron this out. Let's go on to the next headline here. National Review, Kamala Harris flails on Fox News as expected. The story goes on to say, after months of avoiding difficult interviews, Kamala Harris finally walked into the lion's den today, sitting down for an interview with Fox News. With Fox News' Brett Baier. When the interview was announced the other day, the author of this article here, Jeffrey Baier, says, I noted to my colleagues what a gamble it was for Harris. The sort of move her handlers would allow only if previous strategies of avoiding all unscripted media interactions has become untenable. It was a gamble that did not pay off for her, obviously, that it was rated only as a sad failure rather than a spectacular news-making disaster means that her partisans are treating it as we expected. which are basically they're gaslighting. The liberals are gaslighting the public through their news organization, the corporate news conduit, saying that she did wonderfully. And she did manage to eke out a couple, I don't want to say cogent answers, but a couple snippets that they could air on their show and say, here's what she did. That wasn't really the case. If you took it in context, and I'm going to get into it quite a bit as we go through the headlines here, that it was an abysmal failure because Brett Baier redeemed himself with me, at least. I know he doesn't like Trump, and he's a little too straight. I wouldn't even say straight down the middle. I aired this yesterday about my distaste for him because he puts up too many Kamala Harris talking points and airs some of her rally speeches, you know, in the beginning of his program when Fox News is a conservative network. You know, you could be objective, but you're working for a conservative network, which means you don't need to favor Trump, but you should play it fair. In any case, he came right out guns blazing and asked her about the border, specifically asked her about border crossing numbers, and she went into her canned answers, her canned talking points, and my wife immediately said she's running out the clock. Let's get back to the headlines, though. One American News says Kamala Harris's Fox News interview prompts mockery from conservatives, praise from Democrats. How many immigrants crossed the southern border during Joe Biden's administration? Baier asked Harris towards the beginning of the conversation. And she started out her answers, we recognize from day one, and then she went into her canned talking points about the border. Now, she had all this rehearsed, and what she tried to do is run the clock, or some commentators are saying filibuster, which basically, and we're going to get into this, she showed up late, and then she knew there was a hard stop before 6, before Brett Baier's program began. And they did run the interview unedited, basically taped to live. And then, of course, the Democrats, here you have Max Rose say Kamala Harris interview on Fox News was a home run. This is gaslighting. It wasn't a home run. Did she hold her own? Well, yes, she's running for president of the United States. You expect somebody to be able to hold their own. But what she did is what she's been doing in most interviews, including the most recent interview with Charlemagne, the God. She did the same thing. She goes into her canned talking points, and even Charlemagne said after the podcast or the interview that she basically was just giving her repetitive canned answers. Going back to the headlines, PJ Media, did Kamala's Fox News meltdown just end her campaign? I believe it did. In the first question, when she tried to go into her canned answers, and not only did Brett Baier give follow-up, that he broke into her canned answers, knowing that she was trying to run the clock, or as he said, ice the kicker. And she said she started going into her canned answers of basically meandering around the question instead of answering it, because his question was basically, how many immigrants, illegal aliens, were let into the interior of the country under the Biden-Harris administration? Just a number. He just wanted a number. He said, is it 1,000? Is it a million? Is it 200,000? Is it 20,000? Is it 5 million? Just give me a number. She refused to do so. Moving on, the Federalist kind of mimicked this. That Fox News interview may have done to Kamala what the debate did to Joe Biden. The article goes on to say what was widely seen as a Hail Mary move by Kamala Harris's campaign Mind you, what Kamala Harris was doing was a mistake, was a risk, I should say, was risky. The only reason she did it, as I said yesterday, the Charlemagne the God interview was supposed to be her breakout. It was with a fairly friendly black male from the Breakfast Club. That was the place for her to test out her chops by giving straight, cogent answers. But she didn't. She talked around the question, as usual, inserting her talking points, Democrat talking points. So the story goes on to say what was seen as a Hail Mary move by the Kamala Harris campaign. The vice president agreed to an extended interview on Fox News, one of the exceedingly few national TV interviews she's done since she was anointed the Democrat Party's post-Biden nominee. Remarkably, she offered nothing new in terms of her weak, often confusing answers to obvious questions. But she did finally face probing lines of inquiry and necessary follow-up when time after time she attempted to change the subject from her performance in the White House to attacks to Donald Trump, which is a normal tactic, but it's been so apparent that she hasn't given one straight answer, debatably, but from my point of view, she hasn't given straight answers to pointed questions, especially from an adversary like Brett Baier, where she was pressed for straight answers right from the get-go. So I got extremely anxious over this. I was excited, but after the first question, I knew it was over. So she did have some comebacks, and she did get argumentative with Brett Baier. But there was a problem. The Federalist goes on to say there's no longer any denying that she's mindless, superficial candidate who instills no confidence. For anybody who gave it a real viewing. The whole interview, which is was less than 20 minutes in context, and we're going to get to that right now, which was the icing of the kicker, as Brett Baier said. But it's basically they used a strategy to protect Kamala Harris. So there's no way she's going to do Joe Rogan. There's no way. So the New York Post reports Fox News' Brett Baier claims Harris' campaign tried to steal time from the interview, then had VP show up late. It's not really claiming. It's not an substantiated claim. So I don't think this is fair from the New York Post to say it's a claim. Did she or didn't she show up late? Was the interview, which was originally supposed to be 25 to 30 minutes, was not even, when they showed up, they said 20 minutes and it was less. So going back to the story, Baier, a veteran political journalist, compared Harris's campaign tactics to the football team icing the kicker before an important field goal attempt, which means you call for timeouts, you stall to give, right before a game-winning field goal, you give a chance for the kicker to get nervous and anxious, and then he may blow the kick. So Brett Baier said, so we were supposed to start at 5 p.m., and they were ready to receive the vice president by 4:55. This was the time they gave us originally. We were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. The host explained they came in and said, well, maybe 20 minutes, so it was already getting whittled down. The special report host noted that Harris's tardiness made it a challenge for his production team to get the interview out at the start of his show, 6 p.m. show. We were pushing the envelope, he said. So that's how it all started. And I could tell when we were talking that she was going to be tough to, redirect with me trying to interrupt. He continued, referring to the Democratic nominee's efforts to filibuster, as many people say, during the interview and not allow him to get Brett Baier to get a word in edgewise. So keep that in mind. In his post-interview analysis, Baier also revealed that he had hoped to ask more questions, but several campaign staffers were frantically signaling to get him off camera and end the interview because the time was up. So there you go. And the story goes on to say, Baier noted that he believed Harris came into the interview with a goal of cramming in her talking points regardless of the questions asked. Normally you get this kind of in one breath, Baier said, referring to his efforts to get Harris to directly answer his inquiries. Sometimes there is an effort to filibuster, to create a moment, and I think that was her goal coming in. Harris, 59, dodged several of the Fox News host questions during the sit-down, including ones related to immigration, border security, and the President Biden's mental decline. And then there was Mediaite. So you know what side they're taking. So you could look at liberal media, and we're going to get plenty of it today, which are going to crown Kamala Harris as going into the lion's den and slaying Brett Baier, and that she was the one trying to get a word in edgewise. It's evident for those who are in the know, that basically watch news for a living or in the political scene or a journalist, that when you ask a question and you start and the answer starts way off base, like I grew up a middle-class kid or whatever, you know they're not answering the question. It's like a yes or no question, and that's not even allowed in a judicial proceeding, in a trial. Is if you're asked the questions, you have to answer basically yes or no questions. You can't filibuster on the stand. And that's a normal defense technique. So when you see that happening, Brett Baier didn't want to let her do it. In any case, Mediaite says, that's not what you just show. Kamala Harris objects to Brett Baier not airing Trump threatening political foes with violence. And my problem with this is obvious, is that Trump never said that. Trump never said that. He says these people are criminal, they should be arrested. And when he referred to the crazy left rioting, he says you may need to get the National Guard or the military to get them to stop burning buildings and stuff. So she's conflating two different instances. She never said, as Joy Reid and others have said, that he's going to send the military to round up liberals, because that's what they're trying to convey. So what Trump said is we have some sick people, radical left lunatics, okay? So it's not a broad-based attack on Democrats. Radical left lunatics, and if you're a radical, that means you're a left extremist. Trump said on Sunday Morning Futures on Fox News, this is with Maria Bartiromo, I believe, it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by the National Guard or really necessary by the military. And he's talking about the 2020 riots. Then we go back to Harris, who said he talks about the enemy within talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people. That's not what he said. He was referring, as Kamala Harris in the interview said, I'll uphold the law, whatever the law is, which was she tried to side table a question by saying I would uphold the law. That's the law. People breaking the law, rioting and burning things down, he'd send in the military. But and when he talks about the enemy within, which he did say, he was talking about radical Marxists, postmodernists from my point of view, who were determined to undermine the founding principles of this country. Constitutional principles, free speech, Second Amendment, etc. In any case, Trump said when he was with Faulkner They were saying like threatening, like I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening, which is true. And even if you look at the assassination attempts, not the third one, because that was an assassination attempt, as we found out, is that particularly the second guy was a left-wing lunatic, as was more than likely the first guy, but it's debatable. And then the story goes on to say, Kamala Harris said, this is a democracy, and in a democracy, the president of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. It's not what he said. That's what she said. She's putting words in his mouth. People who break the law should be locked up. It's not about the person that can't handle criticism is the left. And they do everything to gaslight. And even they have the FBI skewing crime numbers to help them out and lie about job numbers, et cetera, et cetera. All they have is to point to Trump and say he's something that he's not. And the problem, I have a big problem with the word fascist. Now, if you're a fascist, the only thing that's different between communist authoritarianism, which is councilism, and fascism, which is also authoritarianism, is in fascism, there's no unification of everything into state power. All the pillars of power, whether it be corporate or religious or the state, or what have you, unions, whatever the pillars of power are in fascism means those pillars of power work together as an authoritarian bloc to subjugate the people. What we have in America is corporate fascism. So the Democrats are, to be honest, are even more guilty, but debatably just as guilty as Trump may be to say they're fascist. The problem is Trump says in his words, he wants to give the power back to the people. And in a republic, that's where it should reside. The people elected to office are representatives of the people, not just the people that elected them, but all the people. And they need to answer to the people. That's republicanism. That's not fascism. So they banty about with the word fascism. It's not real. Now, is Trump supported by Elon Musk? But Elon Musk, he's not supported by X or SpaceX or corporations. There's a difference there. And what you have with the Biden administration is notably social media companies and the Biden administration working together to unconstitutionally suppress free speech, which is in the First Amendment, which is the most protected individual liberty. So that's fascism. That's a documented case of fascism. So if you could document a case, it's the same thing with Biden and the pharmaceutical companies et al. Working together to institute a mandate for certain medical procedures. That's also fascism. Trump didn't do that. Did he work with pharmaceutical companies? Yes. Did they do something to suppress the constitutional rights of the citizenry in a republic? No, they didn't. So you throw around the word fascism. Fascism to the left just means you're a right-wing authoritarian, which he isn't. All right, back to the news. PJ Media, shameful. Kamala shouts, whines, cannot answer basic questions in Fox News interview. Going on with the story here, she refused to answer basic questions about her own policies on the record of the Harris-Biden administration repeatedly filibustered to avoid answering and even shouted at one point. She was combative throughout, And it was blatantly obvious that she planned to avoid answering substantive questions at all costs, which was apparent. It doesn't matter what the liberal media says about that she won or she did great or whatever. She didn't answer direct questions. When followed up by Baier, she refused. So it's one thing that you try to get out of a question, but then when the follow-up again puts up the same question, any good journalist would say, okay, so you're refusing to answer the question, which she did. So that was my problem there, that she had a problem. She was combative throughout. She didn't want to answer direct questions. She wanted to get out her talking points. That's what she planned to do. Even Baier said it. It was obvious. They tried to run down the clock, and in the meantime, get out talking points that attack Trump and blaming everything on Trump, which of course isn't the case because we didn't have sort of this stuff under his administration. So will black men be watching Fox News debate? Maybe. They might get snippets of it online. What we do see is black men turning to conservative alternative media online, or at least getting a little of both, which is admirable for black men to do. So as I think anybody should do, if you're getting your news online, I don't think you should get it from X. I think you should get a variety of different news sources. But if they're getting conservative news also, I think that's good. And the conservative news will show that Kamala Harris is vapid and it, an idiot, for lack of a better word. The Federalist, and disingenuous. Harris won't say when she first noticed Biden's cognitive decline after she helped cover it up. Of course not, because that'll make her culpable in the whole scenario. And I don't want to digress into that too much. Also, the post-millennial said Kamala campaign clarifies opportunity agenda for black men is open to others as well. I don't know why I went to this. Yeah, that was a misplaced article. Excuse me. This is the one I wanted to go to. Fox News. Kamala Harris avoids questions about Biden's mental decline. Joe Biden is not on the ballot. Harris repeatedly touts Biden's fitness to serve before his dramatic exit from the 2020 race. And Baier said, you told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that he ran around circles around his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished? After a brief pause, which was, you should have saw the expression on her face was, I can't believe you asked that question, and how am I going to get out of this? Harris continued touting Biden's ability in office. Joe Biden, I've watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making important decisions on behalf of American people. Well, didn't answer the question. More news, just the news. The Biden-Harris administration has a math problem. Voters are paying for it. The FBI discreetly revised a reported violent crime rate in 2022, showing an increase rather than purported decrease in crime that was widely touted by the Biden administration and reported in the media, including during the debate. When it comes to the statistics that may allow voters to assess the Biden administration's performance, its math doesn't always add up. Revised crime statistics are just one example. The administration has also faced scrutiny for making several adjustments to job numbers, as we see lately. And how could the job numbers be going up when layoffs are happening and stores are closing all over the place? Often revising them down after the news cycle has moved on. Biden's Homeland Security Department has also faced accusations that it is admitting thousands of inadmissible aliens at the border to paper over scope of immigration crisis, and also lying about the number of flights and the amount of illegal immigrants being flown into the country at taxpayer expense. But the most important one Recently, this is from the Tampa Free Press, FBI quietly revises 2022 crime data, now showing an increase in violent crime. Also, the New York Post, FBI quietly revised 2022 crime data to show violent offenses rose rather than dropped. We know this. The apparent stealth edit to the Bureau's statistics, first reported by Real Clear Investigations, shows that the raw numbers of violent crime incidents, including murders, assaults, and rapes, rose to 1,256,671 in 2022 from 1,197,930 in 2021, an increase of 4.9%, which is significant in violent crime nationwide. The Telegraph also reported violent crime went up, not down under Biden, revised FBI numbers show. By definition, most shoplifting is petty plunder, candy bars. I just want to make sure that this is... Yeah, this is, sorry about that. There were a few snafus there. I just want to say that, going back to a headline that was misplaced back there, that the Harris campaign said they were going to give money to black men only for business startups, $20,000. And then they had to revise that and said, no, that's for all men, which is sexist, or all people. Because what they did was racist. You can't offer federal subsidies for one specific race. Besides, I'm not going to go into this, but I'm looking at this text here, and this has to do with, I think this is a misplaced headline that has to do with I don't know where it goes. I think it's a petty crime statistic. So let me just look at it. By definition, most shoplifting is petty plunder, candy bars, baby formula, lipstick, but the small stuff adds up. Oh, I know where this goes. This is is it the Atlantic? Sorry, kids. Hold on a second. Where is that Atlantic article? Did I not put it in here? I'm sorry, that was ill-organized of me. There was an article here that I don't have the headline for. That's a little strange. That was about shoplifting, stores closing, and it was a liberal reporter that went into a store and said they're just criminals in there with garbage bags loading the stuff up. And I don't know what I did with the headline. If you give me a second here, I'll just double check. No, I don't have it. That's weird. All right. Enough of that. So the next headline up here is from Just the News. Harris's $1 billion war chest can't buy a winning message. The Harris campaign reportedly has spent more than $250 million advertising since early September, more than doubling such expenditures from the Trump campaign. Despite a substantial gap in fundraising expenditures and advertising, the ex-commander-in-chief currently has 60% chance of winning. The question remains, why hasn't Harris been able to move the needle in the other direction? The Trump campaign offered one explanation, given the vast amount of money her campaign spent and the willingness of MSM to give her a pass at every turn. How is it possible that she's gone backward in the Trump campaign's internal polling, which is starting to filter out into the media, because she can't convince voters that she is the change agent? And then it goes through a lot of other mistakes she made. Pro Harris is real mad ad. If you didn't see this advertisement, it shows beta males acting like we're real men. And as I explained, what real men are, or what I believe masculinity is the ability to face, confront, and shoulder emotional hardship, physical hardship. I even went into intellectual hardship, but that isn't fair to, they are real men who have limited intellectual capacity, and that shouldn't take away from their masculinity. But if you can shoulder emotional hardship and physical hardship, I think that makes you a real man. And obviously, the thing that makes you a real man the most is shouldering responsibility, period. But some of that responsibility as a man is shouldering emotional and physical difficulty. I'm not saying that women can't also do that. I'm not trying to be sexist. I'm just saying what makes up a real man is the ability to do so. I also think stoicism is a masculine trait, or one of the traits that illustrates masculinity. All right, moving on to the Federalist, why crunchy moms and independent doctors are now aligning with the political right, and then it goes into why it happened after the pandemic for obvious reasons, but now it has branched out into Make America Healthy Again. And so crunchy suburban moms who care about what's in their food, water, and air, which they should, what's going into their kids' bodies, and also the brainwashing and the indoctrination that's happening to the kids, all of a sudden, moms are realizing the fact that certain figures on the right have been talking about this for a long time. Media backlash to Make America Healthy Again. They mocked it. They mock Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But people speaking up against what many call America's sick care system, referring to poor nutrition, disease, pharmaceuticals, are not on the fringe. They're actually mainstream. And what these people, these crunchy moms, should understand also, that there's a psychological component to all of this, which includes social media and also indoctrination happening in the schools. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. As a side note to this story, ABC News protesters demand Kellogg remove artificial colors from Fruit Loops and other cereals. If you didn't know, hundreds of people, not dozens. ABC News says dozens of people because they're corporate. So corporations are like brothers. They look out for each other. So, or the elite do the same. But the problem is that Penn Live, in their lead, said hundreds of activists, not dozens. It's the same thing with the mainstream media to saying, oh, Trump, they never talk about Trump's rally sizes that reach close to 100,000. Hundreds of activists on Tuesday marched at WK Kellogg's company headquarters in Battle Creek, Michigan, protesting the manufacturer's use of ingredients in cereal. The Washington Post has an article here, massive influx of shadowy get out the vote spending floods swing states. Well, indeed, because they're swing states. It's a highly contested political race. But the problem is here they lead with a picture of a guy in a MAGA t-shirt. And my first thoughts on this are, why is the Washington Post talking about dark money? Because dark money and Kamala Harris's war chest is bigger, but dark money, there's more dark money coming from the left than the right, obviously. So why show a Trump person? Because the Washington Post, which is a CIA outlet, and people on the left are noticing that actually the conservative ground game, thanks to Elon Musk, specifically in Pennsylvania, but in other places. The great thing about Musk is his team, the people under him, get shit done, like in minutes. You know, they don't foot drag and they get things done right away. And so with what's happening is Musk is funding a door knocking campaign. And so the Washington Post and the liberals are scared of it now. So they're saying shadowy get out the vote money spending flood swing states. Now it's not shadowy from Elon Musk. He has a PAC and he uses the PAC money. Everything is legal, what he's doing. It's not shadowy. And he doesn't shy away from saying, like most billionaires, like Soros will fund stuff and he doesn't want to know, he doesn't want anyone to know he's funding it. So the story goes on to say the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has offered Americans $47 for each swing state voter they recruit. So it's for recruiters in his effort to elect Donald Trump. So how is that shadowy? It isn't. But in the next paragraph, it says Democratic groups have started paying at least $160 to more than 75,000 voters who agree to contact dozens of their friends and relatives, with the request to support Kamala Harris. Democratic group, you don't even name it. And you don't know where the funding comes from. So the dark money is going to the Democratic groups. They list one of the groups here. In Philadelphia, a nonprofit plans to mail some 100,000 copies of a comic book this weekend to every voter under the age of 32, featuring the Liberty Knights, a superhero squad that defeats Dr. Mayhem's quest to steal the city's spirit in 2-minute ruby shards and stop the youth from voting. Let me guess, Dr. Mayhem probably has blonde hair or whatever. So as I said, they don't name the people on the Democratic side who are funding these shadowy groups. When Elon Musk is openly saying, hey, he's getting his team out there on door-knocking campaigns and is willing to pay the door knockers $47 for everybody they sign up. Sounds good to me. New York Post, Minnesota school bans substitute teacher who reenacted George Floyd's murder on student. Behavior is reprehensible. So in Minnesota, little technical difficulty here. Was working. A Minnesota high school substitute teacher was banned from campus for allegedly kneeled on the back of a student to reenact the 2020 murder of George Floyd while claiming police brutality isn't real. Excuse me. I'm going to just go quickly through this. The reality is I don't agree with what this substitute teacher did. Substitute teachers or any teachers that put their views onto the kids at school shouldn't be there. That's not what you're there. You're not to indoctrinate kids for any reasons, however. But the school for suspending him for saying this is stupid because they're like, oh, it's reprehensible. It's Woodbury High School in Woodbury, Minnesota, is the fact that he's correct. The cop, who's the substitute teacher, was just trying to demonstrate that the restraint used by the officer that supposedly killed George Floyd, which isn't true, was a legal restraint. And it's legal because it in no way compromises the health of the subdued perpetrator. In this case, George Floyd. George Floyd died of an overdose. He did not die. And certainly, whatever the cop's name was, shouldn't have been arrested for murder because he used a legal restraint method. And maybe the guy, Floyd said he was saying he couldn't breathe way before he was ever restrained, or way before he was ever restrained in that manner. He OD'd. He wasn't killed by a cop. The police brutality thing was, in my viewpoint, orchestrated. I don't want to get into why, I digress here, but the whole thing that he gets suspended for stating facts is ridiculous to me. Yeah, no, this isn't working. It's my OBS. The Associated Press, judge invalidates election rules passed by Trump. A Georgia judge has declared 7 new election rules recently passed by the state election board illegal, unconstitutional, and void. Fulton County Superior Judge Thomas Cox, He's a cock, all right. So the rules invalidated include 3 had gotten a lot of attention, 1 that requires a number of ballots to be hand counted, and close the polls, and 2 that had to do with certification of election results. This is the state election board, and I think their verdict trumps that, but obviously they got sued by a special interest group, probably funded by dark money. So you know where this goes. The reality is that it should be done in the legislature, but the way they do it in Georgia is through the legislature. They elect an election board and so on and so forth. So technically that's democratic in the way they do it. Just the news, judge allows lawsuit against San Francisco for creating drug crime containment zone. Now, if you didn't know what this is a judge in San Francisco allowed a lawsuit that is suing the city because, as most cities do, and this is a democratic city in a democratic state, is to create ghettos. So a lot of times and this was a problem originally with public housing, they would cluster it all together. And then when the crime rose there, they would just kind of wall it off and make sure that they keep the crime from filtering out into wealthier neighborhoods. It's the same thing. They're creating a ghetto is what they do is they try to contain the crime and drugs and homelessness into one section and then try to keep it from bleeding out. Is that an effective crime fighting policy? I don't really know. But the point is it illustrates how bad San Francisco has gotten and that every part of a city should be crime-free. But that's what happens when you defund police. You don't have the resources to go into the worst areas. And that's basically what they do. All right, NBC News has a story, The Pipeline, how Russian propaganda reaches and influences the U.S. At least 50 false narratives have been launched this way since last fall. In one fake video, a Ukrainian troll farm operator reveals the machinations behind a CIA plot to defeat Trump. How do you know that's they can't debunk that? So in a fake video, what do you mean it's a fake video? I don't know. We don't know if the CIA is involved in a plot to defeat Trump. We certainly know that in 2020, the FBI was. You know, it went all the way back to the former head of the CIA, Comey, leaked material to a friend who then leaked it to the media about Donald Trump. Then they had FBI employees developing an insurance policy if Trump got elected. I mean, so going back to the beginning when PJ Media stated that it's time to snap out of it, you have to snap out of it. All truths must reconcile. Otherwise, it's going to create cognitive dissonance. Did the FBI illegally try to undermine the Trump candidacy and presidency? Of course they did. There's no doubting that. But people have problems with it anyway. Just that last article. A couple more. McConnell called Trump stupid and despicable in private after the 2020 election, a new book says. We know what Mitch McConnell is all about. He's part of the Uniparty. He's involved in China. He's a rhino. He's part of the Uniparty. He's part of the establishment, which aren't for the people. See, what happened is the elites and corporations team together with government to fleece the American people and their tax dollars. That's why we're in a fiscal problem. That's why establishment candidates, the Democrats in this case, want to spend money on everything, to fix anything. Look at Gavin Newsom, spent billions of dollars to try to fix homelessness, and it got worse. It's a fleecing of the taxpayer. They're stealing your tax dollars, and they say they're going to fix things, and they take your tax dollars and invest it into their cohorts, which will promise to fix the problem, whatever it is, whether it's climate change or the border. They just flood money into it and you get no results. And black males out there take this to heart because the Democrats have promised to help and help and help. And they do spend money on helping you, but the money never reaches you directly or indirectly. Like I said earlier, and will continue saying, you don't need to write a check to fix problems like Trump did. Trump just got rid of regulation and gave lenders tax breaks for investing in inner city communities called opportunity zones. So banks are like, hey, we want to save tax dollars. So it incentivized banks to lend, mind you, not to give, to lend money to black or inner city entrepreneurs. So it's been the death knell for Kamala Harris, that interview. It's being portrayed by the liberal mainstream media as a victory because she went on Fox News, and they're going to take snippets and say that Brett Baier wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise. No, he just wanted her to answer the questions, which she wasn't doing. I don't think she answered any questions, really. She tried to put everything on Donald Trump. She didn't assume a responsibility for anything. And I don't think she really answered any questions. It's hard to say. It was unclear to me. I think it was a victory for Brett Baier in his professional career. It was a victory for conservatives. And I think it was the death knell for Kamala Harris, because they're stupid to think that black males or people, independents, whatever, are not going to go online and look at the whole interview. Because the way they think is, these people don't watch Fox News. They'll never see the whole thing. They will just see the clips we put out. That's not what's going to happen. Most people will see the interview, and within the first 5 or 10 minutes, I stood up and I said, it's over. And my wife kept screaming, she's running the clock. She's running out the clock, because she was talking in circles and not letting Brett Baier ask more questions. So that's it for me. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, give me a thumbs up. Remember, I try to be live on Rumble every day at 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. You can check me out on social media, X, Facebook, Get Our Minds. Check out my other website, liphop.org. Don't forget, you're under attack. Moms out there, don't forget, your kids are under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to the trick, and I'll see you tomorrow. Announcement here, I will not be posting a podcast tomorrow, Friday. I have a job. I'm going to be gone all day. So I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Stay hip to the trick. Respect.
Like, everybody needs to be woke.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
Rudy's Revelation.